On a frigid February night in 1989, a Boeing 747 carrying 337 souls cut through the darkness at 29,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The cabin was peaceful. Passengers dozed, read books, or watched movies. Flight attendants prepared the meal service. Everything seemed routine on United Airlines Flight 811 from Honolulu to Auckland, New Zealand. But in the cockpit, Captain David Cronin had just received a warning that made his blood run cold. A single indicator light, a minor malfunction, according to the manual. The kind of thing pilots see dozens of times in their careers without incident. His co-pilot suggested they continue on. After all, they were already an hour into the flight. Turning back would delay hundreds of passengers, cost the airline a fortune, and probably amount to nothing more than a faulty sensor. Captain Cronin stared at that amber light. 16 years of flying experience told him something was wrong, but protocol said it was optional to return. The pressure to continue was immense. He made his decision. They would press on to New Zealand. It was a choice that would haunt him forever. Because 13 minutes later, at exactly 2:09 a.m., the impossible happened. A massive explosion ripped through the right side of the aircraft. 9 passengers were instantly sucked out into the night sky, falling 2 miles into the Black Pacific Ocean. The Boeing 747 pitched violently, dropping 9,000 feet in less than 2 minutes as Captain Cronin fought desperately to save the remaining 328 people on board. This is the story of how one ignored warning led to one of the most terrifying disasters in aviation history, and the miracle that followed. To understand what happened on Flight 811, we need to go back to the beginning of that fateful journey. February 24, 1989 started like any other day for the crew of United Airlines Flight 811. Captain David Cronin, 59 years old, was a veteran pilot with over 28,000 flight hours under his belt. He had flown everything from small prop planes to massive jumbo jets. His reputation was impeccable. Colleagues described him as methodical, careful, and unflappable under pressure. Exactly the kind of pilot you want in command when things go wrong. His first officer, Al Slater, age 46, had logged 15,000 hours of flight time. The flight engineer, 63-year-old Randall Thomas, completed the experienced cockpit crew. Together, they had over 60,000 hours of combined flying experience. If anyone could handle an emergency, it was this team. The flight attendant crew consisted of 15 seasoned professionals, led by Chief Flight Attendant Laura Brentlinger. They had prepared the Boeing 747's massive cabin for what should have been an uneventful 9-hour flight to Auckland. The passengers boarding Flight 811 that evening represented a cross-section of humanity. There were families heading to New Zealand for vacation, business travelers, retirees finally taking that dream trip to the South Pacific, young backpackers starting adventures. Among them was Lee Campbell, a 63-year-old grandmother traveling with her son and daughter-in-law. There was Anthony and Barbara Falaski, newlyweds on their honeymoon. Dozens of other souls, each with their own stories, dreams, and loved ones waiting for them at their destination. None of them had any idea they had just boarded a plane with a fatal flaw. The Boeing 747-122, registration number N4713U, had rolled off the assembly line in 1970. For 19 years, this particular aircraft had faithfully carried passengers around the world. The jumbo jet was an icon of aviation, a marvel of engineering that revolutionized air travel. With its distinctive hump and massive size, the 747 could carry over 400 passengers across oceans with unprecedented reliability. United Airlines was proud of its 747 fleet. These planes represented the future of aviation, the pinnacle of safety and comfort. But there was something the passengers didn't know. Something even the crew didn't fully understand. The Boeing 747's cargo door design had a critical vulnerability. The massive doors on the lower deck were secured by a complex system of latches, locks, and electrical mechanisms. When everything worked perfectly, the system was foolproof. But if certain components failed in a specific sequence, the door could appear locked when it actually wasn't. And at altitude, with the cabin pressurized to simulate ground level, that unlocked door would be holding back over 14 pounds per square inch of pressure trying to escape. The equivalent of several tons of force pushing against a door that wasn't properly secured. Flight 811 departed Honolulu International Airport at 1:52 a.m. local time, 14 minutes behind schedule. The delay was minor, just the usual boarding complications. As the massive jet thundered down the runway and lifted into the Hawaiian night, Captain Cronin felt the familiar satisfaction of a smooth takeoff. The 747 climbed steadily, banking out over the dark Pacific. Inside the cabin, passengers settled in for the long flight. Flight attendants began their safety demonstrations, though few people paid attention. It was all so routine, so familiar, so safe. At 2:06 a.m., approximately 1 hour and 14 minutes into the flight, something changed. The Boeing 747 had reached its cruising altitude of 22,000 feet and was still climbing toward its assigned altitude of 29,000 feet. In the cockpit, the 3 crew members were monitoring their instruments, maintaining radio contact with air traffic control, and managing the dozens of systems that keep a jumbo jet flying safely. It was during this routine monitoring that flight engineer Randall Thomas noticed something unusual. An amber warning light had illuminated on his panel. The cargo door warning light. Thomas immediately drew Captain Cronin's attention to the indicator. In aviation, warning lights come in different colors that signify different levels of urgency. Red means immediate danger, requiring instant action. Amber means caution, something that needs attention but isn't necessarily an emergency. The cargo door light was amber. According to Boeing's procedures and the flight manual, an amber cargo door light could indicate several things. It might mean the door wasn't properly secured, or it could simply mean a faulty sensor was giving a false reading. The manual listed it as a minor issue that didn't require immediate action. Captain Cronin faced a decision that every pilot dreads. Do you trust the warning light and turn back, causing massive delays, passenger frustration, and airline costs for what might be a false alarm? Or do you trust the statistics, the engineering, and the fact that false sensor readings are far more common than actual door failures? In his 16 years of flying, Cronin had seen dozens of warning lights that turned out to be nothing. The Boeing 747 had been flying for 2 decades without a single catastrophic cargo door failure. The odds of this being a real emergency were astronomically small. First Officer Slater voiced what everyone in the cockpit was thinking. They were already an hour into the flight. They had burned thousands of pounds of fuel. Turning back to Honolulu would mean dumping fuel over the ocean, landing heavy, disappointing 337 passengers, and likely delaying them for many hours while maintenance inspected what would probably turn out to be a faulty sensor. The pressure to continue was enormous. Airlines lose money with every delay. Passengers miss connections. Crews exceed their duty hours. The entire system is designed to keep planes moving. But David Cronin was a careful pilot. He didn't dismiss the warning light entirely. He and his crew went through the checklist for cargo door indications. They reviewed the procedures. They discussed the possibilities. The manual clearly stated that an amber cargo door light, in the absence of other indications, did not require an immediate return to the airport. They could continue to their destination and have maintenance check it on the ground in Auckland. This was standard operating procedure. This was what their training told them to do. This was what any reasonable pilot would decide. Captain Cronin made his choice. They would continue to Auckland. He would monitor the situation carefully. If anything else unusual occurred, if any other warning lights illuminated, if there was any change in the aircraft's behavior, they would immediately turn back. But for now, based on all available information, the prudent course of action was to continue. He radioed his decision to United Airlines dispatch, informing them of the cargo door indication and his plan to have it inspected upon arrival in New Zealand. Dispatch acknowledged. Everything was by the book. Everything was according to procedure. For the next 13 minutes, Flight 811 continued its climb toward cruising altitude. In the cabin, passengers were completely unaware of the discussion taking place in the cockpit. Flight attendants began preparing the meal service. People read, slept, or chatted with their neighbors. The cabin altitude was pressurized to feel like 8,000 feet elevation, comfortable and breathable. Outside, the actual altitude was approaching 23,000 feet. The difference in pressure between inside and outside the aircraft was increasing with every moment. And on the right side of the fuselage, just behind the wing, the forward cargo door was not properly latched. At exactly 2:09 a.m., 3 minutes after the crew decided to continue, the unthinkable happened. Without warning, without any additional alerts, the forward cargo door on the right side of the aircraft catastrophically failed. The massive door, measuring approximately 9 feet by 11 feet, was ripped away from the fuselage by the enormous pressure differential between the cabin and the outside air. But the cargo door didn't fail alone. The explosive decompression was so violent that it tore away a huge section of the fuselage wall. Over 400 square feet of the aircraft's skin simply vanished into the night. The sound was described by survivors as the loudest explosion they had ever heard, like a bomb detonating inside the cabin. The Boeing 747 lurched violently to the right as the entire aircraft's pressurization was instantly lost. Everything that wasn't tied down in the cabin became a projectile. Seats, luggage, food carts, and tragically passengers were sucked toward the gaping hole with tremendous force. The cabin depressurized in seconds, causing instant fog as the moisture in the warm cabin air condensed in the suddenly frigid, thin atmosphere. In row 9, seats 8 and 9 on the right side of the aircraft simply disappeared through the hole, along with the passengers sitting in them. In rows 10 through 12, 5 more seats were torn from their floor mountings and sucked out of the plane. In total, 9 passengers were taken by the explosive decompression. They fell nearly 4 miles into the black Pacific Ocean below. Their names were Anthony and Barbara Falaski, the honeymooners; Lee Campbell, the grandmother; Michael Ing, 11 years old, traveling with his parents; John Harita, Ardith Fargo, Rose Carano, Mary Hanley Desso, and Jennifer Kemp. 9 souls lost in an instant, but the horror didn't end there. The sudden, massive hole in the fuselage had catastrophic effects on the aircraft's structure and systems. The explosive decompression created a shockwave that traveled through the plane at supersonic speed. This shockwave severely damaged the right side number 3 and number 4 engines. Debris from the fuselage, seats, luggage, and cargo was ingested into both engines. The number 3 engine immediately began losing power. The number 4 engine suffered even worse damage and had to be shut down completely to prevent it from tearing itself apart or catching fire. In the cockpit, Captain Cronin and his crew were fighting for their lives and the lives of everyone on board. The control yoke was shaking violently in Cronin's hands. Warning lights and alarms were going off everywhere. The aircraft was descending rapidly, having lost pressurization and suffering severe aerodynamic disruption from the massive hole in its side. The 747 was designed to fly with enormous safety margins, but it was never designed to fly with a hole larger than most living rooms torn in its fuselage. The plane was dropping at over 4,500 feet per minute, plummeting toward the ocean. Captain Cronin's training and experience took over. Despite the chaos, despite the alarms, despite knowing that something catastrophic had just happened, he focused on the fundamentals of flying. First priority, control the aircraft. He fought the control yoke, using all his strength and skill to keep the wings level and prevent the crippled 747 from entering an unrecoverable spiral. The aircraft wanted to roll right because of the aerodynamic imbalance. He had to use full left aileron and left rudder just to keep it flying straight. His arms burned with the effort, but he held firm. Second priority, assess the damage and available resources. First Officer Slater was calling out their altitude and descent rate. They had dropped from 22,000 feet to 13,000 feet in less than 2 minutes. Flight engineer Thomas was rapidly scanning his instruments, trying to understand what systems were still functional. The number 3 engine was running rough but still producing some power. Number 4 was shut down. Numbers 1 and 2 on the left side were running normally, but could they produce enough power to keep this damaged aircraft aloft? The hydraulic systems showed some damage. The electrical systems were compromised, but they still had control. That was the miracle. They still had control. In the passenger cabin, the scene was one of absolute terror. The oxygen masks had dropped automatically when the cabin depressurized, but many passengers were too shocked to put them on properly. Flight attendants, despite their own fear, moved through the aisles helping people secure their masks. The cabin was freezing cold now, with outside air at -40 degrees Fahrenheit rushing through the massive hole. The noise was deafening, a constant roar of wind that made communication nearly impossible. Passengers near the hole could see nothing but darkness outside and feel the incredible suction trying to pull them from their seats. Chief Flight Attendant Laura Brentlinger performed her duties with extraordinary courage. She couldn't see the full extent of the damage from her position, but she knew people had been lost. She could see empty seats that had passengers moments before. She could see the terror on faces around her. But she also knew that panic would kill more people than the decompression. She moved through the cabin, physically guiding passengers' hands to their oxygen masks, checking seat belts, keeping people calm with her presence and professionalism. Her actions, and those of her fellow flight attendants, saved lives that night. In the cockpit, Captain Cronin radioed a Mayday call to Honolulu Air Traffic Control. His voice was calm, professional, but urgent. United 811 Heavy, we're experiencing rapid decompression. We have an emergency, we're descending. The controller's response was immediate. United 811, roger, all aircraft clear the area. You are cleared to any altitude, any heading. Every other plane in the vicinity was ordered out of Flight 811's path. The controller knew that a damaged 747 was going to need all the airspace it could get. But Cronin faced a terrible problem. They were now at 13,000 feet and still descending, though he had managed to reduce the descent rate. They needed to return to Honolulu immediately, but they were carrying 300,000 pounds of fuel. The Boeing 747's maximum landing weight was significantly less than its takeoff weight. Landing this heavy could collapse the landing gear, break the airframe, or cause the aircraft to overrun the runway. The normal procedure would be to dump fuel, reducing the weight to safe landing limits. But fuel dumping takes time, at least 30 minutes to dump enough fuel. Captain Cronin had to make another critical decision. Did they have 30 minutes? The number 3 engine was running rough and could fail completely at any moment. The hydraulic systems showed fluctuating pressure, indicating possible leaks. The aircraft's handling was becoming more difficult by the minute. If they took the time to dump fuel properly, they might not make it back to Honolulu at all. They might end up in the ocean. But if they tried to land this heavy, they could crash on the runway, potentially killing everyone in a fireball. There was no good option, only least bad choices. Cronin made his decision with the same careful logic that had defined his career. They would dump as much fuel as possible on the way back to Honolulu, but they would not delay landing to reach the maximum landing weight limit. They would land heavy if necessary. The risk of structural damage from a heavy landing was better than the certainty of crashing into the ocean if the engines failed. He turned the crippled 747 back toward Honolulu. The airport was approximately 100 miles away. At their current speed and with their damaged engines, that was about 15 to 20 minutes of flying. 20 minutes to save 328 lives. The flight back to Honolulu was the longest 20 minutes of anyone's life on that plane. In the cockpit, the 3 crew members worked with the precision of a surgical team. Cronin flew the aircraft, making constant tiny adjustments to keep it in the air and heading in the right direction. Slater managed communications with air traffic control and the cabin crew, maintaining a flow of information that would be critical for emergency response. Thomas monitored every gauge and instrument, calling out any changes in the aircraft's condition, managing fuel dump, preparing for emergency landing procedures. In the cabin, passengers prayed, held hands with strangers, wrote goodbye notes to loved ones on napkins and air sickness bags. Many were convinced they would not survive. The hole in the fuselage was visible from many seats, a terrifying reminder that they were flying in a broken airplane miles above the ocean. Some passengers reported seeing sparks from the damaged engines. Others felt the aircraft shuddering and rolling as Cronin fought to control it. Flight attendants continued to move through the cabin, providing reassurance, checking that people were secure, preparing for the emergency landing that was coming. Honolulu International Airport received the emergency call and immediately sprang into action. Every available emergency vehicle was dispatched to the runway. Fire trucks, ambulances, rescue teams, all positioned themselves for the worst. The airport's emergency coordinator had to prepare for multiple scenarios. Would the plane make it to the runway or crash into the ocean just short? Would the landing gear hold under the excessive weight? Would the damaged engines catch fire on landing? Would the weakened structure break apart on impact? They prepared for all of it. Captain Cronin lined up for his approach to runway 8 left. The sun was still not up, so this would be a night landing with a crippled aircraft. The 747 was handling sluggishly, requiring constant control inputs. The missing section of fuselage created unusual aerodynamic effects, making the plane want to yaw and roll. The reduced engine power meant he had less ability to correct mistakes. He would essentially get one chance at this landing. There would be no go-around, no second attempt. If he missed the runway, they would likely crash. As the damaged 747 descended through 5,000 feet, then 3,000 feet, Cronin made micro-adjustments to his approach. The aircraft was heavier than it should be by over 100,000 pounds, meaning it would touch down faster than normal and require more runway to stop. The emergency vehicles paced the aircraft along the runway, ready to respond instantly to any catastrophe. In the cabin, flight attendants had passengers in brace positions, heads down, arms protecting their faces. The roar of the wind through the hole was deafening. The landing gear came down with a reassuring thunk. But would it hold? At 2:34 a.m., just 25 minutes after the explosive decompression, the wheels of United Flight 811 touched down on runway 8 left at Honolulu International Airport. Captain Cronin had made one of the most difficult landings in aviation history look almost routine. The landing gear held despite the excessive weight. The tires screeched but didn't blow. The brakes grabbed and began the long process of bringing 700,000 pounds of damaged aircraft to a stop. Cronin applied maximum braking, the anti-skid system cycling rapidly as the 747 decelerated. The runway length was adequate, but barely. They used over 9,000 feet of the 12,000-foot runway before finally rolling to a stop. The moment the aircraft stopped, emergency crews surrounded it. Fire trucks sprayed foam on the hot brakes and damaged engines. Ambulances waited for casualties. Emergency exits were opened and evacuation slides deployed. But there was a problem. The massive hole in the right side of the fuselage meant that some of the normal emergency exits couldn't be used. Flight attendants directed passengers to functioning exits, maintaining order even as people desperately wanted to flee the damaged aircraft. The evacuation took longer than normal, but it was controlled and safe. No one else was injured in the landing or evacuation. As passengers slid down the emergency chutes onto the tarmac, many broke down in tears. The reality of what they had just survived was overwhelming. They had been on a plane that lost 9 people and a huge section of its structure, yet somehow made it back safely. They had plummeted 9,000 feet in minutes, yet walked away without additional casualties. They had been, by all reasonable expectations, doomed to die in the Pacific Ocean, yet they stood alive on solid ground. The emotional toll was immense. Some passengers would never fly again. Others developed PTSD, but they were alive. Captain David Cronin was the last to leave the cockpit. He methodically shut down the remaining systems, ensuring the aircraft was safe before departing. When he finally stepped out onto the tarmac, he was immediately surrounded by emergency personnel, airline officials, and media. But Cronin's thoughts weren't on his heroic landing or the media attention. His thoughts were on the 9 passengers who hadn't made it back. The 9 souls who were lost when the cargo door failed. The 9 people he couldn't save, despite his best efforts. In interviews later, Cronin would say that the landing was just doing his job. The real tragedy was that they had ignored the warning that might have prevented the catastrophe entirely. The National Transportation Safety Board immediately launched an investigation into the loss of United Flight 811's cargo door. Investigators faced a challenging task. The door itself, along with the section of fuselage and the seats that were torn away, had fallen into the Pacific Ocean in approximately 14,000 feet of water. Recovering the door would be critical to understanding exactly what had failed and why. The Navy was called in to assist with a deep-sea recovery operation that took nearly 2 years to complete. When they finally recovered the door in 1990, the evidence told a damning story. The investigation revealed that the cargo door's locking mechanism had a design flaw that Boeing had known about for years. The door used a complex system of cams and pins that, when properly engaged, would securely lock the door closed. But if the door closed when these mechanisms were slightly out of alignment, the door could appear locked when it actually wasn't. The warning system would show the door was secure, but in reality, it was held closed only by pressure and not by the actual locking pins. At altitude, with the cabin pressurized, that pressure would force the door open with catastrophic results. Even more troubling, investigators discovered this wasn't the first time a 747 cargo door had failed. There had been previous incidents of cargo doors opening in flight, though none as catastrophic as Flight 811. Boeing had issued service bulletins recommending modifications to the locking system, but these were advisory, not mandatory. United Airlines had not yet implemented all the recommended changes on their entire fleet. The door on the aircraft that became Flight 811 still had the vulnerable design. The NTSB concluded that the cargo door had not been properly latched before departure from Honolulu, and that the door's warning system had failed to alert the crew to the problem until it was too late. But they also found that the design of the door and its locking mechanism was fundamentally flawed, and that Boeing and the FAA had not moved quickly enough to mandate fixes that could have prevented the disaster. It was a systemic failure involving design, maintenance, oversight, and regulation. The aftermath of Flight 811 led to significant changes in aviation safety. The FAA issued an airworthiness directive making cargo door modifications mandatory on all 747s. Boeing redesigned the locking system to make it more foolproof. Training procedures were updated to emphasize the importance of taking warning lights seriously, even when they seem minor. The incident became a case study in aviation safety courses around the world, teaching future pilots and engineers about the importance of heeding warnings and the dangers of complacency. For Captain David Cronin, the experience changed his life forever. He was hailed as a hero for saving 328 lives through his skill and calm professionalism. He received numerous awards and commendations, but he carried the weight of those 9 lost passengers for the rest of his life. In his final interview before retiring, Cronin reflected on that amber warning light and the decision to continue. He said he had followed procedure, done everything by the book, yet 9 people still died. He wondered if he had been more cautious, more willing to inconvenience passengers and the airline, whether those 9 people would still be alive. The families of the 9 victims received settlements from United Airlines and Boeing, but no amount of money could replace their loved ones. Some families became advocates for aviation safety, working to ensure that the lessons from Flight 811 would prevent future tragedies. The cockpit voice recorder captured Cronin's words after the explosion. "We're going to get this back to Honolulu if it's the last thing I ever do." He kept that promise. He brought that broken bird home. Today, the story of United Flight 811 stands as a powerful reminder about the importance of warning systems and the danger of ignoring alerts, even minor ones. That amber cargo door light wasn't a false alarm. It was the aircraft trying to tell the crew that something was seriously wrong. The decision to ignore it, based on probability, procedure, and years of experience suggesting false alarms were more common than real emergencies, cost 9 people their lives. But it also led to changes that have made flying safer for millions of passengers since then. The next time you board an aircraft, remember the lesson of Flight 811. Every warning system, every safety procedure, every precautionary measure exists because someone, somewhere, learned the hard way what happens when we ignore the warnings. In aviation, complacency kills. Vigilance saves lives. And sometimes, the difference between tragedy and survival comes down to how seriously we take that one amber light on the panel.